Good morning. Good to see everybody here this morning. I don't know if I should do this quiz right now or later, but okay, we'll do it now. This is an open book test. Does anybody know what the mission statement of the Woodbury Church of Christ is? Okay, I heard a staff member, Steve, and another staff member, Chelsea, and that was it, and they work here. Come on. What's the mission of the Woodbury Church of Christ? Hey, I get it. You know, I hate it when I'm like in an audience and the speaker gets up and is like, how are we doing this morning? And you hear a few grumbles, fine. And they're like, that's not good enough. You can do better. I hate that. So I'm not going to tell you could do better. You could do better, but I'm not going to tell you that. Yes, that's our mission. And we want to be laser focused on what it means to help people take their next step closer to Jesus. And sometimes you're those people. Sometimes you yourself, you're kind of like, I came to church, but I wasn't really feeling it. It was an act of the will to get out of bed. It was an act of the will to get in my car, to get dressed, to come to church. Probably don't do it in that order. Get dressed, get in your car, and come to church. It was an act of the will to walk into the door. It was an act of the will to sit here. I didn't really want to sing, but I didn't want anybody to look at me because I wasn't singing and think, what's wrong with them, and come talk to me. So I mouthed the words a little bit. It was an act of the will. It's an act of the will to be sitting right here. I get that. And so maybe today what you need is you need to be brought closer to Jesus. Somebody needs to take you by the hand and help you step a little closer to Jesus. And I get that, and that's okay. If you came here with that need, that is okay. You're not a bad person because it was difficult. You're not a bad person because life hasn't been easy. You're not a bad person because you're not feeling it right now. That's okay, but we're glad that you're here. We're glad that you made that step, and we're glad that you're intentional about that. And if you're feeling that, just imagine there's other people around you who may be feeling that too, that you can help. You can say, yeah, me too. I'm not feeling super awesome right now, but let's do this together. Let's step a little closer together. We're in this series called Who's Your One? The point is, Jesus came to seek and save the lost, and he uses us to do it. He said that in Luke chapter 19, verse 10. He said, for the Son of Man, calling himself that, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. This is my mission statement. This is why I'm here. And then Jesus said, I'm going to go prepare a place for you. You guys take care of business while I'm gone, which means that you and I have the task. We have the job, we have the goal of helping people draw closer to Jesus. That's something that we get to do. And I'll tell you what, if you're not always feeling it and you're like, well, I can't help somebody get closer to Jesus because I don't feel particularly close to Jesus, helping other people get close to Jesus helps you get close to Jesus. It's a pretty wild idea. It's a pretty wild thing. So, you have a one. We have 40 ones written on the wall outside. We rolled it outside this morning. So those little tags, those little pieces of paper people wrote down. They wrote down a name. They wrote down a relationship. They wrote down somebody that came to their mind when they thought, this is the person that I want to help. This is the person that God has placed on my heart. This is the person that I want prayer for as we get closer and closer to Jesus. And I know there's more out there. Some of you you may not know the person's name. You can write down the barista at my coffee shop. Write that down. We'll pray for that person. Write down the mom that I talked to one time at my kid's soccer game, and she seemed like she was really going through it, but I don't know her name. You can write that. There's not enough room. You can turn it over on the back, but you can write that down. We will be praying for your person, and I'm excited to hear stories about your one. Somebody told me not too long ago that they have two ones. And that is grammatically awkward, but theologically great. They have two people in their life that they're really hoping they can help draw closer to Jesus. And they said as they were thinking about them, they hadn't even started praying for them yet. Both these people who they don't interact with on a consistent basis called them out of the blue with some like deeper than regular, let's talk about the weather stuff. Because I think God is excited that you are thinking about that one, and he wants to help that process happen. It's so important and so cool when it does happen. And in fact, one of his ones lives in another state, said, I'm coming to your house for dinner. I mean, another state. What are the odds of that? Woodbury used to support a missionary. They've since moved back. His name was Ricardo Reyes, and he was working down in Cuernavaca, Mexico. And it was super interesting to hear him tell stories about what he did. Now, this guy in particular was sort of extra gifted at interacting with people and reaching them for Jesus. But one of the stories he told, it was in a little newsletter he would send out, is that he was driving on his way to church on a Sunday morning, and he pulled up to an intersection, and just like happens in a lot of different places, a lot of different countries, somebody trying to make a little spare change at the red light came up and poured soap on his windshield and then was going to clean it for him. It just happens. You've probably had this happen. If you've been in other countries, you've seen this happen. And as they do this at the red light, and it's a pretty fascinating process. Like, I'm not a very good, like when you go to the gas station and you clean your window, I leave and it's all streaky and awful, and my wife hates it when I do it. But these people are real fast, they're real good. And in the span of a red light where this guy's cleaning his windshield, Ricardo talks to him, says, hey, would you be interested in coming to Jesus? And somehow convinces the guy to get in the car with him and go to church that morning. That's unbelievable. That would be the coolest story I ever heard. If you were like, yeah, I got up, I was one person in my car. By the time I got to church, there was another person in my car, and here they are. That would be incredible. I would be like, that's just amazing what God is doing. Now, the problem is those kinds of stories will get you excited, they will get you amped up, but at the same time, those kinds of stories can be a little discouraging. And you're like, wait a second, you just got all wound up about it. Why is it discouraging? Because when that kind of stuff doesn't feel like it's happening in your life, you wonder, why isn't God using me? Why isn't there progress in the person who I am praying for? Am I not praying hard enough? Am I not saying the right things? What is going on in my situation? Because the things with your one may not be so easy. Many of you, if not all of you, when you thought about a person that you would like to help draw closer to Jesus, have had these thoughts. You may have thought, my one, it's a little complicated. There's history. There's tension. They know me too well. And if I were to invite them to church, they would be like, you go to church? They have questions I can't answer. They have experienced church hurt that I don't know how to address. They have said, I would never step foot in a church. How in the world am I going to convince them to get closer to Jesus if they've got all this pain and this experience? Some of you, your one, grew up going to church. They have heard it all, and they chose not to follow Jesus for whatever reason. And it's painful, and thinking about them is painful, and you pray for them all the time, but it seems like there's no possible route for them to reconnect with God because they're just so distant, they're so far, they're so jaded, they're so hurt. So for whatever reason, you feel like your one is impossible. And maybe you've thought, maybe I should pick an easier one. Maybe I should, if there's a visitor I don't recognize in the parking lot, I'll just pretend that they're my one, and then I can tell Patrick, look, my one, they were on their way in anyway, but who knows? That's cool. My one is impossible. If you have your Bibles, I'd love for you to turn to the book of Acts, chapter 16. We were in Acts chapter 16 last week, and remember we told you about this super fascinating, interesting story of Paul meeting a one that God had planned for him in the town of Philippi, and how it had just taken all these different turns. Well, later in that same town, this story happens, and we're kind of picking up on the middle of the story, but you'll see where we're going in a second. Acts chapter 16, starting in verse 22. The crowd joined in the attack on Paul and Silas. So you're like, okay, we are really coming in on the middle of a story. And as the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten with rods, after they had been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. This isn't going super well in terms of trying to invite people to church. In fact, this is kind of the opposite. Verse 24, when he, the jailer, received these orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet to the stocks. By the way, the people who were arresting, beating, stripping Paul and Silas thought they were immigrant, itinerant people just wandering through town. There's layers to what's happening here. Verse 25, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. And I love this line. And the other prisoners were listening to them. They didn't really have a choice, I suppose. They didn't have anywhere to go. Verse 26, suddenly there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once, all the prison doors flew open and everyone's chains came loose. Verse 27, the jailer woke up, and when he saw that the prison doors open, he drew his sword and he was about to kill himself because he thought the prisoners had escaped. Well, why? That seems like an odd move. Why would he do that? It's a feature of Roman law that there's public trust in the custody of prisoners, and that if a prisoner escaped, the person who was in charge of that prisoner would receive the same punishment that that prisoner would have otherwise. And so this guy thought, all the prisoners are gone. I'm going to get executed. I'm just going to take matters into my own hands. Verse 28, but Paul shouted, don't harm yourself. We're all here. Somehow, in the middle of this, Paul had convinced everybody, stay here, don't escape, don't harm yourself. The jailer called for lights, and he rushed in and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He brought them out, and he asked, sirs, what must I do to be saved? Verse 31, they replied, believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household. Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and all the others in his house. Verse 33, at that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds, and then immediately he and all his household were baptized. The jailer brought them into his house and set a meal before them. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole household. That's a wild situation. If you were to outline an impossible situation, this would be it. You're in prison, and you're one that you want to draw closer to Jesus is the guy that's in charge of keeping you there. That's a tough situation. None of you are quite in that scenario. That's an impossible situation, but you read the story and you're like, oh, yeah, earthquake, and it was very cool. Paul's singing, Silas is singing, they're praying, and all of a sudden this guy's like, what do I need to do to be saved? Wouldn't that be amazing if your one came to you this afternoon and was like, what do I need to do to be saved? So it feels unrelatable. I mean, imagine if you heard this as a testimony from a friend or at church, you'd be like, wow, it's exciting, good for you, but nothing like that would ever happen to me. It's a little like, I don't know if anybody else ever does this, but it's a little bit like Hallmark movies, right? You watch a Hallmark movie, life is never like that. The big city lawyer who's burnt out from this law practice never moves to the small town and buys a bakery and then meets the love of his life that he fell in love with in high school, but she didn't want anything to do with him and he forgot all about her. Then stuff like that never happens, and you watch those movies and it's just like, well, that's exciting, but it's unattainable. It's not how real life is. But this is real life. The book of Acts is real life. This is a real story, and it's here for a purpose. One of the things that I think is interesting about this story is that the pivotal dynamic at the heart of the story is something that is universal and accessible to every single one of us, even in 2025. I want you to put on your thinking cap for a second. We read through this story. Ask yourself this question. You don't have to shout out an answer, but I guess you can if you want. What prompted the change of heart in the jailer? What prompted the change of heart in the jailer? He likely, according to the narrative of the story, had heard Paul preaching through town. That's what caused the riot that got Paul beaten up in the first place. So it's likely news that spread over the whole town. He had likely heard Paul's message. And even hearing Paul's message, that didn't prompt his change of heart. He doesn't ask Paul, what do I need to do to be saved after Paul preaches? He doesn't ask Paul, what do I need to do to be saved after Paul prays and worships at midnight. In fact, I would have been yelling at him to shut up probably. He doesn't ask after the earthquake, what do I need to do to be saved? He asks that question after Paul says, hey, don't hurt yourself. We're all still here. Why does that make the difference? Now, maybe there were elements of Paul's preaching. Maybe there were elements of the worship. Maybe there was some passing conversation that they had that played a role in this guy being interested in having a change of heart. But it was something about when Paul said, hey, don't hurt yourself. We're all still here. That's when this guy actually had a change of heart. Why is that? Why did that make the difference? Why was that the thing? My oldest daughter just had to renew her license back in the spring, and we've all been threatened that if you don't get your real ID, you're going to go to jail at some point, and then they keep kicking the deadline down the road. But she thought, my driver's license is expiring. I'm going to go in and get my real ID because that's what I'm going to need to travel anyway. So she gathered all the documents. We looked all the things up. She was only home. She was at college. She was only home for this narrow window of time. And we gathered everything we thought we needed. And oh my goodness, the list of things that you need to get this thing is long. You have to have your social security card and your current ID, and it has to be valid. You have to have a sample of your DNA and promise them your firstborn child. And it's a lot of stuff. So she got down there, and we had sent stuff that we thought surely they will accept these documents. And she finally waited, got to the front of the line, and the guy looked at her stuff, and he's like, well, you're one document short. We had some things that didn't qualify. You're one document short. And she's like, what do I need? He goes, I need a document that will prove that with your name and your address that you live in Minnesota, that you're a resident of Minnesota. The license doesn't work. The passport doesn't work. W-2s didn't work. A letter from the governor didn't work. It was all nuts. And so she's been at college for the last 4 years, so she doesn't have any. Oh, and by the way, the letter had to be within the last 12 months. She didn't have any mail, or at least that I could find, that would prove that she was a resident. And she's just like, what am I going to do? My license is going to be invalid. I won't get the real ID. I don't have, this is a problem. And if you've ever been there when you're trying to get government documents, it's just demoralizing, right? Because this person has this power, and they're not trying to help you. They're not interested in your benefit and your good. They want you to submit this thing in triplicate. It's just ridiculous. This guy, this guy deserves 5 stars. He's talking to my daughter, and who knows, I don't know exactly why he did this, but he's like, hey, do you like to fish? I'm like, what are you doing right now, man? Is this some sort of, are you asking her on a date? What are you doing? Do you like to, he did this thing where he's like, do you like to fish? She's like, no, I don't like to fish. He said, all the stuff that you have qualifies you for a Minnesota fishing license. Okay, I'm not here for a fishing license. Do you get commission? What's going on? If you have a fishing license, that's the document you need that will give you the real ID. Loophole. So, my daughter can now fish in the state of Minnesota, and she will never use that. And she qualified for her real ID. That's awesome. It's unusual to be at a place like the DMV and have someone actually interested in your good that's actually working for you. It feels like they're working against you. But every once in a while, you come across a person, for whatever reason, I don't know what his motives were, that was trying to help her. I am on your side. See, Paul could have just left the prison. This earthquake had opened the prison doors. In fact, something similar had happened to Peter earlier, and that was Peter's way of escape. But for some thing that we don't fully understand, that it's not explained in the story, Paul understands that the earthquake isn't there for him to escape, even though he could. He understands that the guy hurting him, the guy holding him in prison, will be punished, will be accused if he escapes. Paul looks at this guy, and he says, I'm on your side. I am for you. Despite what you've done to me, I am for you. I want your good even at my expense. And that is the point. Not the worship, not the earthquake, not the preaching. That is what moved the needle. It was Paul's act of goodness, at least in the story, that turned the jailer. Genuine goodness builds influence in the lives of the people around you. Genuine goodness. When people believe that you are truly for them. If you surveyed your life and thought about the most pivotal moments in your life where someone treated you with such kindness, with such mercy, with such grace, it was because you were convinced that they were on your side despite what you had done, that they were for you. Now, this word goodness is actually pretty interesting. It's a fascinating word. It doesn't seem interesting, but it is. Greek and Hebrew have a depth to the word good that we don't consider in English. We have it, but we don't consider it. You read good in the Bible and you think morally good. That's what comes to mind, morally good. And so sometimes when we read a statement like that, my moral goodness will build influence. But that's not what he's saying. We think, be good. I donate blood. I hold the door open for the person behind me, no matter how far away they are. If the cashier accidentally gives me too much change, I always give it back. I vote in the off-cycle elections, even for county clerk. I am good. I'm good. I'm morally good. But that's not what the biblical word primarily means. In fact, there's some pretty interesting verses in the Greek version of the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 39, verse 6. Now, Joseph was well-built and handsome. Same Greek word as good. Joseph was well-built and good-looking, according to the Bible. Interesting. Same word as the word we sometimes think of as moral goodness. Matthew chapter 6, verse 10. This is the story of the woman anointing Jesus' feet with oil, and people were criticizing Jesus, criticizing her, and Jesus says, hey, stop, don't bother this woman. She has done a beautiful thing. This is a beautiful gesture. In John chapter 2, verse 10, the maitre d' at the wedding said, hey, everyone likes to bring the choice wine out at the beginning, but this family saved the good wine, the quality wine, for the end. That's interesting. The best wine. Have you ever been in a museum and just been captivated by a painting? Where you're just like, man, it's not just technically good, but it's captivating. There's something that just arrests your attention and you stop and you stare at it. That's good. Or have you ever just listened to a song and just got caught up? Maybe you're at a concert or even just in your car by yourself listening to a song and you're just caught up by the song. That is good music. It's not just technically correct where they hit all the notes, but there's something captivating. There's something beautiful about it. True goodness, according to the Bible, is moral beauty. And this is the depth that we forget. And this is why I think we sometimes struggle understanding how to build influence with the people in our lives. True goodness is moral beauty. It's the way the world should be, but often isn't. It's that human kindness that is just not the norm. I was reading a story this week. A woman was sharing about when she was a kid, her dad had tipped their server, who had been incredibly rude to them, had tipped the server well. And they were like, why would you do that? You're supposed to use the tip to show them how bad they are. And if they're a bad server and they're rude, you don't tip them anything. And the dad said, I could tell she was having a tough day. And so I just wanted to let her know it was okay. I'm here for you. Wait, the server is supposed to serve you. You're not supposed to serve them. Not if you're interested in moral beauty and goodness and building influence in the world, then you are interested in serving your server. And in the story, the woman writing it said that the server actually ran out of the restaurant crying, chasing this family, saying, I'm so sorry, because she was overcome by that gesture of kindness. That's not just good, it's not just technically right, it's morally beautiful. It's morally beautiful. There's plenty of examples like this. This is from years ago. It's the Nebraska Cornhuskers football team. They were playing spring ball. There was a kid named Jack Hoffman who had been diagnosed with brain cancer, but he's a huge fan. And so they let Jack Hoffman suit up during the game, and he played a down of football. And, you know, you can imagine these guys, they're not playing good football. But this is morally beautiful to let this child experience a moment that in a life that has been otherwise so difficult. And so the quarterback hands him the ball, and the blockers, of course, the defensive players aren't really trying. They're playing bad football, but they're doing a morally beautiful thing, and the crowd is erupting because Jack Hoffman scores a touchdown. It's a beautiful thing. It's good, but it's also beautiful. Here's another example. This was intended to be an anonymous lady who paid for a stranger's flight. What had happened was the dad was bringing his daughter on a trip and just didn't understand, was confused. His daughter was 2 years old and didn't understand that he had to pay for a ticket. It's under 2, not 2 and under. And he got to the airport, and he didn't even have enough money to change his own flight to a different day, much less buy a ticket for his daughter, and he was distraught. Overcome, like, what do I do? He had saved up all his money for this particular trip. And this lady, a complete stranger to him, stepped in with her credit card and paid $750 so that this guy's 2-year-old could fly. She was trying to be anonymous, wasn't trying to publish this for her own good, wasn't trying to blow her own horn. But somebody snuck a picture, and people recognized her, and she immediately published who she is and her name, and the people around her was like, oh yeah, that sounds exactly like something she would do. It's moral beauty. It's not just good, it's beautiful. One last example of this, and there's so many I could give you, but is this one. This is a journalist, African-American journalist by the name of Al Letson, and he's at a protest. It's an anti-hate rally, and a couple of people showed up with Confederate flags at an anti-hate rally. So what do you think happened to these people? Well, yeah, the anti-hate people were like, we hate that guy, let's beat him up. And so Al Letson, supposed to be an impartial journalist, realizes, I'm worried about this guy's life. So he throws his body on top of the guy wearing the Confederate flag so the anti-hate people won't beat him up. That's not just good, it's morally beautiful. It would be easy to say and look at that situation and say, he gets what he deserves. Dummy, wearing that what's wrong with you? Your attitude deserves you to get beat up, maybe even killed. Instead, he throws his body to protect this man from the blows of other people. It's a morally beautiful thing to do. It's not just technically correct, it's transformative. It's not just ethical, it's beautiful. It's not just rule-keeping, it's life-giving. It's staying in prison despite the fact that you could just walk right out because you know it will cost this person who has brought you harm. Moral beauty. See, Paul could have fallen into the pattern of thinking that most of us do. He's been unjustly treated. Paul is actually a Roman citizen and deserves due process. None of what's happened to him is right, and the jailer is complicit. Paul does not owe him anything. If bad things happen to him, well, that's on his own head. He made his bed, he can lie in it. Those are the consequences of what he's done. He should have thought about that before he got in this line of work. That's what we would have thought. I'm out of here. And Paul says, no, I'm going to remain in prison to bless this person. Moral beauty. True goodness. True goodness. Not just being technically right. True goodness transforms others. Look at what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 and 15. You are the light of the world. You, followers of me, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. It brings a betterment to everybody around you. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your beautiful deeds, your good works, and glorify your Father who is in heaven. I think Jesus was channeling Isaiah chapter 58, verse 10. I just think this is a beautiful verse. If you spend yourself on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like noonday. Goodness builds influence. Now, here's why it works. Here's why moral beauty, beautiful goodness works in the life of the people around you. Number one, goodness circumvents debates that you can't win anyway. You can spend all your time on Facebook arguing about stuff. You're never gonna get anywhere. Has that ever happened? Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever argued with somebody on Facebook and finally they're like, you know what? You're right. I've come around to your point of view. No, never happens. It's just not going to happen. Goodness circumvents debates that you're not going to win anyway. If you're thinking about your one and they're like, they're so wrong about politics, they're so wrong about Jesus, they're so wrong about everything, if they can see Jesus in you, that is way more convincing than anything that you could ever say or any book you could ever send them or any podcast that you want them to listen to. Because they're seeing moral beauty. They're seeing Jesus at work through you. You don't want to convince someone anyway. You want to captivate them. You don't want them to comply. You want them to be changed. Goodness treats them like a person, not a project. Goodness treats them like a person, not a project. Years ago, a guy came into town from another state and, hey, can we get dinner? Yeah, that'd be great. I haven't seen you in a long time. Let's get dinner. And we got dinner together. And he's like, well, the reason I'm here is I've got this great opportunity for you. And it was like phone cards or something ridiculous. And I'm like, really? It just ruined it for me. I don't want to. I'm a project? Like, is that all? Goodness treats people like a person, not a project. And then goodness inspires transformation without manipulation. You can get people, sometimes, you can get them to conform by withholding acceptance, but that will almost always lead to resentment. You can get them to conform, but you don't want conformity. You want transformation. Especially when that person realizes they can find acceptance elsewhere. They don't have to get acceptance from you. Goodness disentangles my response from their behavior. And this is important. You are a recipient of God's goodness, God's moral beauty in your life. God has done things for you that are just unbelievable, whether you recognize it or not. Not only are you a recipient of it, you are a conduit of God's goodness and His grace and His mercy and His love. You're a conduit. So let's go back to the beginning. Who's your one? Who's your one? How can you interact with them in a way that shows that you are for them? That you're not just trying to convince them of something, that you're not just trying to sell them on something, that you're not just trying to make sure that they understand your brand of faith, but that you are truly, deeply for them.